So we have that first 250 years of the Roman Republic.
Yes.
So from about 500 to, let's say, 250 BC. And in that period, they gradually expand throughout Italy, conquer the other Italian cities who are pretty much like them. So they're people who already speak similar languages or the same language, have the same gods. It's easy to integrate them. That's the ones they make the half-citizens and allies. Then in the second half of that period, from about 250 to, let's say, 30 BC, Rome goes outside of Italy. And this is a new world because now they're encountering people who are really fundamentally different. So true others. They do not have the same gods. They don't speak the same language. They have fundamentally different systems of economy, everything. And Rome first expands in the Western Mediterranean. And there, their big rival is the city-state of Carthage, which is another city founded almost the same time as Rome that has also been a young, vigorously expanding, aggressive empire. So in the Western Empire at this time, you have two sort of rival groups, and they're very different because the Romans are these citizen soldier farmers. So the Romans are all these small farmers. That's the basis of their economy, and it's the Romans who serve in the army. So the person who is a citizen is also really by main profession a farmer, and then in times of war, he becomes a soldier. Carthage is an oligarchy of merchants. So it's a very small citizen body. They make their money through maritime trade. So they have ships that go all over the Mediterranean. They don't have a large army of Carthaginians. Instead, they hire mercenaries mostly to fight for them. So it's almost these two rival systems. You know, it's different philosophies, different economies, everything. Rome is strong on land, Carthage is strong at sea. So there's this dichotomy. But they're both looking to expand, and they repeatedly come into conflict as they expand. So Carthage is on the coast of North Africa, Rome's in central Italy. What's right between them? The island of Sicily. So the first big war is fought purely dictated by geography. Who gets Sicily? Rome or Carthage? And Rome wins in the end. They get it. But Carthage is still strong. They're not weakened. So Carthage is now looking to expand. The next place to go is Spain. So they go and take Spain. Rome, meanwhile, is moving along the coast of what today is France. Where are they going to meet up? On the border of Spain and France. And there's a city at that point, at this point in time, called Saguntum. The second big war between Rome and Carthage is over. Who gets Saguntum? So, I mean, you can just look at a map and see this stuff coming. Sometimes geography is inevitability. And I think in the course of the wars between Rome and Carthage, called the Punic Wars, there is this geographic inevitability to them.
Can you speak to the Punic Wars? Why was, there's so many levels on which we can talk about this, but why was Rome victorious?
Well, the Punic Wars really almost always comes down to the second Punic War. There's three. There's three Punic Wars. The first is over Sicily. Rome wins. The second is the big one. And it's the big one because Carthage at this point in time, just by sheer luck, coughs up one of the greatest military geniuses in all of history, this guy, Hannibal Barca. He was actually the son of the Carthaginian general who fought Rome for Sicily. Hamilcar was his father. But Hannibal is this just genius, just absolute military genius. He goes to Spain. He's the one who kind of organizes stuff there. And now he knows this second war with Rome is inevitable. And so the question is, how do you take down Rome? He's smart. He's seen Rome's strength. He knows it's the Italian allies. So Rome always wins because even if they lose battles, they go to the Italian allies and half-citizens and raise new armies. So how do you beat them? He can never raise that many troops himself. And Hannibal, I think, correctly figures out the one way to maybe defeat Rome is to cut them away from their allies. Well, how do you do this? Hannibal's plan is, I'm not going to wait and fight the Romans in Spain or North Africa. I'm going to invade Italy. So I'm going to strike at the heart of this growing Roman Empire. And my hope is that if I can win a couple big battles against Rome in Italy, the Italians will want their freedom back. And they'll rebel from Rome and maybe even join me. Because most people who have been conquered want their freedom back. So this is a reasonable plan. So Hannibal famously crosses the Alps with elephants, dramatic stuff. Nobody expects him to do this. Nobody thinks you can do this. Shows up in northern Italy. Romans send an army. Hannibal massacres them. He is a military genius. Rome takes a year, raises a second army. We know this story. Sends it against Hannibal. Hannibal wipes him out. Rome gets clever this time. They say, okay, Hannibal's different. We're going to take 2 years, raise two armies, and send them both out at the same time against Hannibal. So they do this, and this is the Battle of Cannae, which is one of the most famous battles in history. Hannibal is facing this army of 80,000 Romans about, and he comes up with a strategy called double envelopment. I mean, we can go into it later if you want, but it's this famous strategy where he basically kind of sucks the Romans in, surrounds them on all sides, and in one afternoon at the Battle of Cannae, Hannibal kills about 60,000 Romans. Now, just to put that in perspective, that's more Romans hacked to death in one afternoon with swords than Americans died in 20 years in Vietnam. I mean, the Battle of Gettysburg, which lasted 3 days and was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, I think the actual deaths at that were maybe like 15,000. So this is bloodshed of an almost unimaginable scale.
It's also brutal.
Yes.
Just a
I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think of that. So now this is Rome's darkest hour. This is why the Second Punic War is important, because there's that, Nietzsche phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This is the closest Rome comes to death in the history of the Republic. Hannibal almost kills Rome. But no, it's not much of a spoiler. Rome's going to survive. And from this point on, they're going to be unbeatable. But this is the crisis. This is the crucible. This is the furnace that Rome passes through that is the dividing point between when they're one more up-and-coming empire and when they're clearly the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. So what do they do about Hannibal? Well, they're smart. We're not going to fight Hannibal. We're not going to give Hannibal the chance to kill more Romans. So they adopt a strategy that they'll follow Hannibal, or they raise a couple more armies, follow Hannibal around. But whenever Hannibal turns and tries to attack them, the Romans just back off. No, thank you. We're not going to give you a chance. Meanwhile, though, they're not scared of other Carthaginians. So they raise a couple more armies and they send these to Spain, for example, and start attacking the Carthaginian holdings there. And by luck or necessity, Rome comes up with its own brilliant commander at this point, a guy named Scipio. And he wins victories in Spain, conquers Spain. Then he crosses into North Africa and starts to conquer that and ends up threatening Carthage directly. And poor Hannibal, undefeated in Italy, has now been walking up and down Italy, or marching up and down Italy for 12 years looking for another fight, and the Romans won't give it to him. Mm-hmm. They've been attacking all these other areas and chipping away at Carthaginian power. So finally, after more than a decade in Italy, Hannibal is called back to defend the homeland, defend Carthage from Scipio. The two meet in a big battle. This should be one of the great battles of all time. It's the Battle of Zama, but, Hannibal's guys are kind of old by this point. Scipio has all the advantages. He wins. Carthage is defeated. So that's pretty much the end of Carthage. The city survives, and then 50 years later, the Romans wipe it out, but that's not much of a war. But from this moment on, from the Second Punic War, which ends in 201 BC, Rome is undisputably the most powerful nation in the Mediterranean world. And having conquered the West, they're now going to turn to the East, which is the Greek world. And the Greek world is older, it's richer, it's the rich part, half of the Mediterranean, it's culturally more sophisticated, it's the world left by Alexander the Great that's ruled by the descendants of his generals. And the Greeks kind of view themselves as superior to the Romans. I mean, to the Greeks, the Romans are these uncouth, sort of savage barbarians. Mm-hmm. But they're going to get a real shock because the Roman army now has gotten really good to beat Hannibal. And when they go east, they're going to just defeat the Greeks relatively easily, one after the other. And there's a famous historian named Polybius, who is a Greek whose city was captured by the Romans. He later becomes a friend to the Scipio family. Mm-hmm. He actually teaches some of the Scipio children about Greek culture. And he writes a history of Rome. And his motivation for writing this is, he says at the beginning of this book, he says, surely there can be no one so incurious as to not want to understand how the Romans could have conquered the entire Greek world in 53 years. Because that seems unimaginable to him. So he's writing this entire history as a way to try and understand, how did the Romans do it? We were these wonderful, superior people, and they came around in 50 years, bang, that's the end of us. So that's his motivation.
Could you maybe speak to any interesting details of the military genius of Hannibal or Scipio? At that time, what are some interesting aspects, this double envelopment idea?
I mean, Hannibal is good because he understood how to use different troop types and to play to their strengths and how to use terrain. So, I mean, this is basic military stuff, but he did it really well. So, one of his victories against the Romans, for example, is when the Romans are marching along the edge of a lake and their army is strung out in marching formations. They're not kind of in combat formation, but they're strung out along the edge of this lake. It's misty, there's not good visibility, and he ambushes them along this lakeside. So, Lake Trasimene. And it's just using the terrain, understanding this. Again, Hannibal's very much outnumbered, but he's able to use the terrain and to take the enemy by surprise. At Cannae, he's working against the expectations. So the traditional thing you do in the ancient world is the two armies would line up on opposite sides of a field. You'd put your best troops in the middle. You'd put your cavalry on the sides. You put your lightly armed skirmishers beyond those. And then the two sides kind of smack together. And the good troops fight the good troops, and you see who wins. Now, Hannibal is hugely outnumbered by this giant phalanx of heavy infantry, which is what the Romans specialized in. They're very good at sort of heavily armed foot soldiers. So he knows, I don't want to go up against that. I don't have that many of that troop type. My guys aren't as good as the Romans anyway. So he lines up some of his less good troops in the center against the big menacing Roman phalanx, and he tells them, okay, when the Romans come, you're not really trying to win. Just hold them up. Just delay them. And even tells them you can give ground. So you can retreat and sort of let the line form a big kind of C-shaped crescent. Let the Romans sort of advance into you, but just hold that line. And meanwhile, he puts his cavalry and his good troops on the side. And so on the sides, those good troops defeat the Romans, and then they kind of circle in behind the Romans and attack that big menacing Roman phalanx from the rear where it's very vulnerable. And so Hannibal catches the Romans in this sort of giant cauldron just with people closing in from both sides. And they get pressed together. They can't fight properly. They panic, and they're all slaughtered. And that strategy of double envelopment, of sort of going around both sides, becomes the model for all kinds of military strategies throughout the rest of history. I mean, the Germans used this in their Blitzkrieg in World War II. A lot of it was kind of that, go around the sides and envelop the enemy. On the Eastern Front, they had a bunch of these sort of cauldron battles where they would go around and try to encircle huge chunks of the Russian army and do the same thing. Supposedly, even in the Gulf War, it was part of the U.S. strategy for the invasion of Iraq to do this kind of double envelopment maneuver. So it's something that for the rest of military history has been an inspiration to other armies.